Welcome to Clutch and Go, where we have our second installment for Mazda month, and behind me is the Mazda 3. And just look at her. She is quite stunning to look at. I must say I'm particularly fond of this particular shade of blue, and as we can see, Mazda's new design, as we saw in the CX-3, comes through very strongly in this model as well. You can see that this is a particularly good looking hatchback and that it is quite big. It's significantly larger than anything in, for instance, the Volkswagen range, and that is extremely beneficial, although it might not be to everyone's liking, seeing as, from my experience, the Mazda 3 does fill a parking space quite significantly. But other than that, I must say I'm super pleasantly surprised by the Mazda 3. It's one of the best vehicles I have ever driven, and I'm including quite a lot of vehicles in that mental list, and I'm going to give you the reasons as to why I say that. Just like in the CX-3, the Mazda 3 has keyless entry, which is super convenient as always. And if we have a look around inside, you'll see that it does look slightly different from the CX-3, especially here in the center console. Personally, I prefer this. This air conditioning system is much easier and simpler to operate once you have the hang of it. I'm not going to lie, first time I saw the dual and the auto buttons, didn't know exactly what to make of those, but they are fairly easy to figure out in no time at all. Then ergonomically, what's happening here is much better designed than in the CX-3. Firstly, you have some stowaway space, which is very convenient, and due to this, they've moved the control unit for the infotainment system forward ever so slightly, and you do not realize how uncomfortably placed it was in the CX-3 until you start working with it in the Mazda 3. It's just all in all more comfortable to use. You know exactly where to place your hand when you want to use it without looking at it while you're on the road. And the padded stowage space over here, adding a rest for your arm, simply just makes this much more comfortable to use in general. The only downside is the sport button is over there now, and if you are sitting back in the seat a bit, then it's a little bit of labor to reach it, but something you get used to quite quickly as well. Besides for that, we see that we have all the same features as in the CX-3, the Bose sound system, which sounds beautiful, and upon starting the car, you are also welcomed with the same heads-up display unit that we saw in the CX-3, which is also just very convenient in general. Beyond that, once you get in the car, you are welcomed by these extremely comfortable seats. I have legitimately never been as comfortable in a car as I have been in the Mazda 3. It is astounding how absolutely comfortable these seats are. I've driven in it now for quite some time, and at no point have I ever been uncomfortable. Beyond that, all the little bits and bobs that make cars just slightly more luxurious, your sunglass stowage space, sunroof for beautiful sky blue days like today. And then let's go look at what really makes the difference between the Mazda 3 and cars like the CX-3. Now firstly, if you have passengers sitting in the back of the Mazda 3, as you can see, my knees are not even touching the driver's seat, and I am quite tall. I'm also not as close to the roof as I was in the CX-3, which means I am generally much more comfortable than I was in the CX-3 as a passenger. And this, to me, is one of the first problems of these CUVs, these compact crossover vehicles. Now, even though I think the CX-3 is an amazing car, it's an amazing CUV. If I had to buy a CUV, I would most probably go for the CX-3 because it's slightly different than the rest. But ultimately, this is what you sacrifice with these CUVs, because they have to change the proportions and the platform of the car, but you are sacrificing so much space. And that is one of the reasons why you actually want it, because you want to use it as a family car most probably. And as you can see, there is so much more room in the Mazda 3, which begs the question, why do people actually want CUVs when you have more space in something like this? If we go have a look at the boot, this is where the really big difference comes in between the Mazda 3 and the CX-3. There is so much more space in the boot. I can literally climb in here if I wanted to. The boot seems to me about a third of the size bigger than the CX-3s, which again begs the question, why would you buy a CUV? Because you don't really get any utility out of it more than you would out of this Mazda 3. I mean, it's not even higher from the ground than the Mazda 3. So I really don't understand it, but I guess to each his own. Some people might like that, but that's not for me to judge. I'll leave that one up to you. So now let's find out what the Mazda 3 is like to drive. So just like in the CX-3, we have the same 2-liter engine with an automatic 6-speed gearbox, and because this is the top of the range model, we have the flappy paddles on the steering column as well. Now, first things first, the Mazda 3 has very nice suspension, very nice steering feel, and you can set up a very nice seating position, which means overall you get a very sporty feel from the car. And this doesn't just stop when you get into the car. This is propagated by the way the car drives as well. It is a lot of fun to drive, mainly because of the steering. The steering is awesome, and the suspension works so well with it, because any corner you take, no matter how sharp you do so, you take it flat. I mean, there's no questions asked. It's just flat all the way, and that feels so good in every single sense of the word. Now, all of this is accompanied by all the standard luxuries that we saw in the CX-3 as well. But the seats are so much better in the Mazda 3. It is ridiculously comfortable to be in all the time, even on bumpy roads like the one I am on now. You don't even realize that there are bumps at all, which is fantastic. And now, because it is here and because it's fun, I am going to give you a little taste of what happens when you engage in the sport mode. Okay, so as you can see, it's not mind-bogglingly fast. It's about as fast as the CX-3 was, but it just feels so much better. It's got the same drivetrain, same transmission, everything. It just feels better because of the steering and because of the better suspension. You don't get any suspension thumps or the sounds of suspension bottoming out or anything, which I admittedly did experience in the CX-3 every now and again, especially when cornering fast or going over bumps quite quickly as well, which means that the overall build quality of the Mazda 3 is so much better. And the build quality just shines through the entire car. Okay, let's see if you can actually sort of see what I experience when cornering. Oh, it's so flat, so fantastic. You can get out of the turn really properly fast if you want to, and that is just amazing. This is seriously an epic car to drive. No fuss, no drama, just pure handling prowess, which translates to a lot of fun. And let's quickly talk about the build quality of the Mazda 3. It is simply astounding. There are no creaks, no cracks, no hisses, nothing. Everything sounds fairly well built in that you don't hear anything, which is fantastic. And that is something that is amiss in modern Japanese vehicles. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And what I mean by this is the fact that with the Mazda 3, you have a really good balanced vehicle, which is what Japanese vehicles used to be all about. That's why we fell in love with them, because they were well built, they would last a lifetime, and above all else, they were fun to drive, just like this one. You are buying into a premium marquee when buying a Mazda 3 without negating fun. And that is really what it's all about. And that's what makes this car such a lovely car to drive. So I would definitely encourage anyone who might be in the market for a premium hatchback to have a look at the Mazda 3, because it is much better priced compared to its competitors. For example, like a Golf, a similarly spec Golf will cost you about 100,000 Rand more, which is a lot of money, especially if you take into account that 415,000 Rand for this Mazda is already a lot of money. Which begs the question, why do people buy other premium hatchbacks if they are so expensive? I don't really get it. There's a lot that I don't understand, but one thing that I do understand is this Mazda 3, and I really like it, and I'm pretty sure if you get into it, you're going to just fall in love with it as well. Now, there are two main issues that I do have with the Mazda 3, and that is mainly the brakes. The brakes aren't good enough, in my opinion. This is very personal to me. I don't feel the brakes the way I would like to feel the brakes. And the other thing would be the infotainment system. Now, with the infotainment system, there's no option to change the artist you're listening to, or the album you're listening to, or the playlist you're listening to via the infotainment system and the central control unit itself. You have to do it on your phone, which to me kind of negates the whole point of the wireless system to a very large degree. But that might just be my problem, might not be yours. So my main issue would be the brakes. The brakes do not comply with the overall sporty feel of the Mazda 3. And I feel like that's one area of improvement that is quite important. But again, very personal opinion, that might just be me. So that's it for Clutch and Go. That's it for my first impressions video on the Mazda 3. Please share, like, subscribe, and then stick around to view the upcoming content on the other Mazda models.